This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program News Analysis, now we bring you a dialogue on remembering the major events of 2013. The participants are Professor Rizwan Kaisar, Jamia Millia Islamia, and Sandeep Dixit, The Hindu.
Dr. Rizwan, this year that is going by 2013 has been a very eventful year, but all years are eventful when we talk about it at the end of the day. But in this case, 2013 appears to be unusually eventful in the sense that on the political scene, the entire year saw protests over corruptions, a lot of voices being raised by the people against corruption, and at the end of the day, there were elections to 4 states and a very surprising result was thrown in one state, Delhi, where the stranglehold of 2 traditional parties was broken. And which brings us to the issue whether this means more changes in India's political system, that the bells rung in 2013 will continue to chime ahead. Second was the Delhi rape case of December 16th, after which a lot of work was done to ensure that the national consciousness becomes more sensitive to the cause of women. And what we had been seeing previously and had been enduring of women being abused and the law authorities being insensitive, some correction to that has been done. On the international level, we saw that Iran, after about 30 years of isolation, appears to be coming out, and the Western countries are willing to do business with Iran, and more important, allowing other countries to do business with Iran, and for India, Iran is very crucial. With Sri Lanka, tensions continued over the Tamil issue, but at the same time a lot of work continued to get done. With Pakistan, there was tension on the LOC, there was beheading of Indian Jawans, there was killing of Indian Jawans, and frequent ceasefire violations that led to even Parliament passing resolution against Pakistan's activity on the LOC. And if we come to China, there was this unsavory incident in March of China occupying Chumar area in India for about 3 weeks. And after that, they won back and there were some political tensions, but later we saw India and China doing a lot of business together. And when we come to the end of the year, we find that the last 2 weeks have been dominated on the foreign pages, arrest and strip search of diplomat Devyani Khobragade. So, with such an eventful year, more eventful than perhaps the previous 2, 3, 4 years, how would you analyze on the politically first?
2-3 things that can easily be underlined as far as the political changes that took place in the year 2013. Number one, AAP has emerged as quite an interesting phenomena to watch. Considering the fact that Delhi has been playing the kind of game of musical chair between BJP and the Congress, and the fact remains that the Congress was in power for the last 15 years. And also the fact remains that Mrs. Sheila Dixit did quite a lot for the development of Delhi as a metropolis and all that. But it's still somewhere along the line, I think there was still a moral vacuum, either in governance or in conducting oppositional politics. It is this moral vacuum which has been filled by AAP. And therefore, I have been given to believe that in politics, we all seem to be increasingly becoming cynical about it. But then AAP has given this impression that there is still moral space.
All is not lost.
All is not lost. That means electorate of India is still willing to repose confidence in a party which is willing to assure that politics can still be clean and not necessarily money-driven, media-driven and muscle power-driven. Second thing, what important, that ordinary person, an ordinary citizen also could take part in the political process and not being a mere mute voter on the day of the polling. But I think another issue that you mentioned, that which really shook the conscience of the country, of that rape incident which took place last year, almost around this time, the country was pretty resentful about the manner in which that girl was subjected to and the way she finally died. I think that shook the nation's conscience. And then everybody woke up to this realization that what about the security of women and young girls in public spaces? What about security and respect for the fellow colleagues in a working place, say in a media house or for me in a university department, and women and young girls in the streets? I think it is this which resulted in passing of a law which has at least put the fear of God and law in the hearts of any person thinking of it. Not that the law alone can change the larger context of the society, but I think laws play an important role, which in this case, so therefore keeping these two in mind, I would say that certainly 2013 was an eventful year, one for the shaking of the conscience on the question of gender equality, as well as shaking the nation's conscience on the question of corruption in the political process. As far as the other larger issues of international politics, etc. that you have, I think one would say that India has truly come of age. I would particularly like to mention its current spat with United States of America. The most appalling was when an incumbent Minister of Defense was subjected to body search when he landed there, irrespective of the law. I think we never reciprocated. But what is happening in the current context of Devyani Khobragade is there is a reciprocity in conducting diplomatic relations. If you treat our diplomats like this, then your diplomats will not be able to enjoy the kind of immunity, diplomatic included, and other kinds of immunity. But I think issue goes deeper than this. It is like always, America is given to live in its old world dream. Now it should wake up that there are other powers which have come up, India being one, China being another in our neighborhood. So therefore it is time for them to wake up and realize that no longer can treat Indian diplomats or for that matter any other Indian citizen in a manner that they used to. Other issues, they would be happening with Pakistan, with China. Nobody, like in our day-to-day life, we can change our neighbors by shifting our house. But in the life of a nation, neighbors are permanent. And therefore, every neighbor, not just India, but even China will have to realize, so will Pakistan and others, that we can't change neighbors. And therefore, let us find ways and means of settling down as peacefully as it is possible with your neighbor. And therefore, paying extra attention to our neighborhood in terms of conducting our international relations, I think is vitally important. And that way, India has really shown that level of maturity that despite severe provocation on LOC with Pakistan, Indian leadership acted maturely. So was the case with China. Prime Minister kept on reassuring that let the media not hide the issue beyond a point where it becomes irretrievable.
That is true, and in fact the coming year will be more interesting because there will be a change in leadership in India, and there will be a new leadership in Bangladesh, new leadership has come up in Nepal, there's a new one in China, and Maldives also had a change of government, and even Pakistan has a new government. So it will be a very interesting year internationally ahead. But on the international scene, one of India's main interests is energy. And India has been trying to get more oil, more gas from as many sources as possible, and even nuclear energy if possible. So we will have to see how the equation plays out in next year. But one reason, Dr. Rizwan, perhaps for the unrest in the collective national conscience was also perhaps fueled by the low economic growth and the high inflation rate too. Both of them appear to have hit the common man and the middle class very high across India. In fact, when potato prices, I think, rose in West Bengal, Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee had to change a minister. So it's not something that is restricted just to the center, but it is an India-wide phenomena. Don't you think that also contributed to the feeling of despondency that was being felt all of this year?
As ordinary citizen, as member of the larger society, we all have our concern about the rising prices, inflation, lesser rate of growth compared to what it was during the UPA 1 regime. All these issues are there. But then what is interesting is that we all know that the price rise of essential commodities are also politically manipulated. We all saw that how the onion prices fell down so sharply immediately after election. There are certain issues where things went beyond the control of the government, particularly in terms of taking control of prices of essential commodities. We kept hearing assurances, but no concrete action. What has also happened, like the one major charge the current government in the center suffered, the crony capitalism, allowing few people to get away with whatever they wanted to do. Part of the reason was that the 2G scam was unearthed. Then the minister and others had to go to jail. Overall, if you look at, the economic scenario did not really inspire the way it inspired during the UPA 1 regime. And it is this lack of inspiration that really dampened the spirit, despite the fact that I'm always devil's advocate and I give the government the credit which is due to it. Say for instance, right to education was a very, very important piece of legislation. For that matter, even right to food security is a very important piece of legislation. But somewhere along the line, the corporate sector did not look too happy with these. Like it always thought that in an age of new liberalization and globalization, well, the corporate houses would be deciding the agenda of the government. Which in this case, the government realized that India is still not advanced capitalist countries. India is still a country which is on way to becoming an industrial society. But till then, what happens to the poor society if you don't ensure this? So therefore, there is a lot of corporate attack on the government for having taken the pro-people stance in terms of bringing new policies and making amendments.
And in fact, the media contributed to it because in economics, one major thing is sentiment. And when the media continued to attack the government on India Inc.'s behalf, one saw the sentiment go down. In fact, they harmed their own cause by this. And as you said, India is an industrializing society. It is a work in progress. So we also saw this unsavory rash of communal incidents, and especially one in Uttar Pradesh, if we can make special mention of it, that it is still not settled. So 2013 was also marked by not only a major communal incident in Uttar Pradesh, but also tragedy, partly man-made tragedy in the Himalayas in Uttarakhand, where the armed forces really rose to rescue and they sacrificed their own lives in saving so many pilgrims who had flocked there.
Absolutely. One important piece of legislation which could not go through the parliamentary proceedings was the Communal Violence Bill. If somebody was to ask me, I would equate anybody's participation in communal rights, communal speeches equal to treason. Why this is equal? Because each communal violence, as we have seen in case of Muzaffarnagar, next door to Delhi, each communal violence sets back the entire social phenomena by at least 10 years. What has happened in Uttar Pradesh must not have happened at any cost.
And Uttar Pradesh has hurt itself. There were plans to have an industrial park, the industrial life, that is all gone now.
So that is how I would say that it should be treated at par with treason. But as far as the media and its role is concerned, let me tell you, I have not been really too inspired by the kind of, particularly the electronic media. I mean, they have really, what we used to hear dumbing down, they have really taken their audience for granted. And no meaningful discussions are allowed to take place there. And also, each time attacking the government unnecessarily. Criticism of the government is a valid point. Even the present government, or for that matter, even a future government would know that criticism is bound to come. Even if you are doing your best, yet you will have to put up, because after all, India is a democracy. And a democracy, roots of democracy have truly deepened in India. But the manner in which, and I borrow your expression, the larger sentiment went against it. The favorable climate for investment, either domestic investment or foreign investment, it went down. And that is why the rate of growth also came down. And that is what generated that spirit of dampness all around. That was an avoidable thing, because from time to time we can see that after all, cyclical movement is an important factor in economy.
And talking of electronic media, we find that some of the government's noteworthy initiatives, which you yourself mentioned, food security bill, right to education, they largely went unappreciated or unmentioned. I mean, they were just mentioned passing or in the context of a political crisis, but not in the context of the fact that these are path-breaking legislations. Or the communal violence bill that you mentioned, if that is passed, these are path-breaking legislations that will stay for all time to come. As we enter the new year, you yourself have mentioned so many points that gave us reason for hope that it will be a prosperous, vibrant and peaceful India that we will be looking forward to when we enter 2014. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You are listening to a dialogue on remembering the major events of 2013. The participants were Professor Rizwan Kaisar, Jamia Millia Islamia, and Sandeep Dixit, The Hindu. It came to you in the program News Analysis, produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website, news.air.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsgtalks@gmail.com.